is the topic of nechama. I want to talk about the topic of how we comfort somebody else, how we comfort ourselves. And anyone who has ever paid a shiva call knows that deep down, the concept of comforting is something that is intrinsically contradictory. In other words, what do you do when you go to a tragedy? God forbid, not when someone died a long, beautiful life and sent his pure soul or her pure soul back to America at the age of 120. What happens if, for example, my wife sat shiva for her brother who died in a car accident? How do you ever give comfort to both her, or in a much deeper and more sadder way and more tragic way, her parents? How do we do things like that? Comfort is something that just does not really make sense. To be honest with you, most people feel that the way to comfort is basically by taking your mind off the tragedy. That's actually against the halacha. I'm not blaming anyone. I understand why these things happen. But halachically, the idea of a shiva is that you go there and you're supposed to talk 7 days nonstop about the niftar, or about the niftaris, about the person that died. But when there's a tragedy involved, the idea of nechama seems to be something that is beyond our reach and beyond comprehension. Actually, the only thing that really, really makes sense is just to sit down and to be with the person that you care about that's going through the tragedy and cry with them. That could be giving them strength. That could be giving them chizuk, but that's not giving them nechama. It's not giving them any comfort. The tragedy is still raw. The tragedy is still there for them. So I want to share with you a simple answer, and then I want to share with you something more complex and more dynamic. I have an incredibly powerful story at the end. To be honest with you, I don't normally like that the first share that I give, I'm just getting to know people, should be a share that's very heavy. It's kind of a heavy share, but at the end, I'm going to hopefully tell you some stories that are going to put a big smile on your face, and hopefully end this class on a high note. So let's begin by talking about the word nechama. The word nechama appears in the Torah in the first time at the end of Parshas Bereshis. And there, Rashi gives us a clue to how nechama works. What does he say? The Torah tells us that Hashem looks at his world. This is just before Parshas Noach, and Hashem is not happy. Hashem sees a world that is decadent. Hashem sees a world that is filled with sin, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows that this cannot continue. What does the pasuk say? And I quote to you: "Vayinachem Hashem es ki asa es haaretz ba'aretz." Vayinachem Hashem is literally Vayinachem, would sound like, and God was comforted, but it doesn't make sense, because in this context, God is changing his mind, and he is deciding that he has to do something with his world. Rashi says that that is exactly what is happening. The nechama is Hashem's decision to go and change the way that he's been running the world, and to basically, what we would call, press the delete button and recreate the world through Noach and his family. So what does this have to do with nechama? Nechama, according to Rashi, means seeing the same world, but through a different set of lenses. In other words, Hashem looked at his world, did not like what he saw, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu decides, okay, I'm going to have a nechama by recreating the world differently, which means what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to do is look at the situation in front of him and then evaluate how to see the situation through a different set of lenses. So I know that in the story of Noach, he goes on to destroy the world, but the word vayinachem, says Rashi, means to see the same event, but through a different set of lenses, and that different set of lenses will give you the ability to get to the place that you want to get. So in Hashem's case, the goal of the exercise was to rebuild the world in a way that works. That was HaKadosh Baruch Hu's nechama. The nechama, that what we do when we pay a shiva call, is something very similar, but fundamentally dealing with the situation at hand, which means to look at the tragedy through a different set of lenses. How do we do that? So the key of all nechama, on the most simplistic, most basic level, all nechama, when you're paying a shiva call, is to show the people who are sitting shiva that on the deepest, deepest level, the person who has died is still with us. In other words, what we try and do is we take the tragedy and say, look, the situation is tremendously tragic, but let's talk about the person that died. When you talk about the person that died, you start to bring up memories that show their greatness or show their sweetness or that show their beauty or that make you smile and laugh. All these memories are things that you take with you and you say to yourself, we cannot forget this person. This person has to stay with us and this person has to continue. This is the greatest nechama. The words of the rabbis is that bra kara davua, literally means the child is the feet of the parents, which means when the parents die, the children continue the memories of the parents through their own essence and through the way that they take what their parents give them and pass it on. The greatest form of nechama is to show that on a certain level, the person who is dead is not really, really dead. Interesting custom that we have. We all know that the world was built on three things: Torah, Avoda, and Gemilas Chasadim. You learned this when you were in third grade, that the world is on three dimensions. Torah is the study of Torah. Torah really, really means the study of what life is all about. Torah is how to build yourself, how to become a better person. Avoda is how to have a relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. Gemilas Chasadim is how to build the world around you. What is the default custom that we do in a shiva? Number one, somebody says Kaddish. Kaddish is what's called Avoda. Why Kaddish? That's for another day. The second thing we do is that we sign up in a shiva home to study Mishnayos. Mishnah is the same letters as Neshama. That way, through the power of Torah, that we keep the person alive. And the third thing you'll always see at a shiva home is it's tzedakah box. And we give charity in memory. These are three examples on these three things: Torah, Avoda, and Gemilas Chasadim, that allows us to keep the memory of the departed alive. Just want to add a little personal note over here. And it's crazy, but when my father died, I did not know how awesome my father was. In other words, my father was a hero to me. The things that he did when he was young, during World War II, he saved many, many Jewish lives. He fought in 1948 and 1956 for the state of Israel. He came to England, and there, when he raised us, my father's way was to always be silent. He never spoke about himself. So the Shiva, many, many, many people came up and started telling us stories about the amazing things that he did behind the scenes. And when the Shiva was over, I gathered around my family and say, my dear children, this is the way the world goes. They're going to go back to their homes. Eventually, they're going to forget Abba, they're going to forget Saba. But we have heard these stories, and we, the children, have to make sure that we continue this into the next generation. Baruch Hashem, I just had a whole family get together, and I was playing with my three grandsons who were named after my dad. And Baruch Hashem, we see that the legacy continues. Nechama means seeing the same thing, but through a different set of lenses that allows you to see that what has happened has a continuity, has what's called in Hebrew a hemshech. That is the basic goal of all nechama, to take what is existing now, to see the same thing, but through a different set of lenses in a way that you can cope better. When you leave a shiva home, you say the following words: Hamakom Yenachem Eschem B'soch Sha'ar Avelet Tzion V'Yerushalayim. We call God the Makom. A Makom is a place. A place means something that contains all kinds of different things. When we talk about Hashem as a place, Hashem is a God that can allow opposite experiences for the same event. So when you see Hamakom Yenachem Eschem, means God gives us ability to see the same event through different sets of lenses. B'soch Sha'ar Avelet Tzion V'Yerushalayim. Your tsar is never private. It's always part of Klal Yisrael, and it all eventually leads to Mashiach and Olam Haba and Tchias HaMesim. All of these things are the words of comfort that we talk about during the period of the Shiva. Now, this is not the reason why I'm sitting in front of you on this beautiful Jerusalem night. I did not come to speak to you about how to pay a Shiva call. This is called base one. This is called level number one of how Nechama works. I'm going to take you a whole level deeper. And this is really what I'm coming to say to you today, something incredibly powerful and something incredibly beautiful. First of all, a little comment. We are now in the month of Elul, right? So if you were male, which looking at the list of people, you're not, and if you are male, you're not really welcome here. I don't know who Halberstam is. Halberstam could be a male, but we're just going to assume that it doesn't matter the difference. Again, sorry, I should not be making fun over here. By the way, Halberstam is a royal name. You should just know. It's the name of tzaddikim, so I better not mess over here. The point I want to make is that the men, they know it's Elul, because the men this morning, they heard shofar. If you're Sephardi, you're already saying salichos. We're already into the Elul mode. This thing is now happening big time over here. One of the mitzvos of the month of Elul is to read the Haftarah called the Shiva de Nechemta. So I'm saying this. Again, if you are, number one, a lady, and number two, you're the kind of lady that doesn't go to shul on Shabbos, you wouldn't even know this. And it's okay not to be aware of this. I'm telling you that this is a halacha brought down in the Shulchan Aruch, in Siman Taf Kaf Aleph, halacha ches. It is quoting the Torah, which in turn is quoting the Psikta, which means it's a medrash, which means it goes all the way back to Chazal, that this time of the year, there is a mitzvah to first read 3 haftarahs of what's called 3 of punishment, the paranusa in Aramaic, the 3 that we read between Shiva Asar B'Tammuz and Tisha B'Av. Then you read the Shiva de Nechemta, the 7 of comfort. The main bulk of those haftarahs are going to be in the month of Elul, and it takes you into the new year. And then finally, there's 1 or 2 at the end, which are the ones of Tshuva, which are the ones that we say Shabbos Shuva, or sometimes straight after Yom Kippur that takes you into Sukkot, but they surround the date of Yom Kippur. So you have basically 3 events. Event number 1 is the 3 weeks. Event number 2 is Elul. Event number 3 is Yom Kippur. And you have 3 different types of haftarahs: haftarahs of punishments, haftarahs of comfort, and then haftarahs of tshuva. Ladies, I want you to understand that this is a process. This 3 and 7, and then 1 or 2 at the end is part of a process, not by chance. There's 3 sad Shabbatonim, and then 7 happy Shabbatonim, and then there's 1 called tshuva. No, this is part of a process. Actually, we're not going to do this today, but my Rebbe, Ramesh Shapiro, he takes you through the 7 of Nechama, and he shows that each one is a concept built on the previous one, a different level of Nechama, and they're all from the prophet Yeshayahu, and it's incredibly powerful to read this. I'm telling you now that, and I'm not telling you to learn Navi, God forbid. One day you're going to marry a yeshiva guy, you're going to embarrass him if you're a Navi expert, just kidding. But the bottom line is that these are all Nevi'im that you probably don't even realize you know them. There's so many songs that we sing. Each haftarah is filled with all kinds of famous lines that talk about Tzion and our love for Tzion and the beauty of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to bring the Geula and so on and so forth. Now, what I want to do is understand how the system works, because you got 3 sad weeks, 7 comfort weeks, and then the tshuva at the end. What exactly did Chazal want that we should do nechama through the power of the Navi, through the power of the prophets? And more fundamentally, how on earth does it work? Let me give these questions a little bit of perspective. Let's talk for a moment about the 3 weeks of tragedies. From Shiva Asar B'Tammuz till Tisha B'Av is every single major Jewish tragedy in history belongs to those 3 weeks. Those 3 weeks are called in Hebrew Bein HaMatzarim. Bein HaMatzarim means literally we're straitjacketed. Klal Yisrael is trapped by evil, and when I say evil, I mean evil, evil, evil. We're talking about from the Churban, with all the terrible things that happened in the tragedy of the destruction of the temple, all the way throughout history, and events like the Spanish Inquisition and the Spanish expulsion that began on Tisha B'Av. And as you all know, the Holocaust has its roots in World War I that began also on Tisha B'Av. We're talking about the worst of the worst of the worst of the worst. Everything happened during those 3 weeks. Let's take, I'm sorry to ruin your appetite, let's take some worst case scenarios. The Chazal talk about in the times of the Churban that the mothers had to do terrible things to their children. I can't even say the words. And these things were repeated in the Holocaust. When you think about the Holocaust, I can give you many, many classes, but I cannot explain to you in any form of way how Hashem could allow suffering for children or sadism to children. It was so bad. And when we talk about things like this, it does not make any sense that we can just switch into the world of Nechama. It doesn't make any sense that these words of comfort, what are you comforting? You can say there's gonna be a beautiful future, woohoo. It doesn't take away from the tragedy, it doesn't take away from the deaths. If you're talking about your grandparents, that either are the children of Holocaust survivors or great-grandparents, and that what they went through, it doesn't take away what they went through. You can say to them, okay, that was the past, let's look at a beautiful future. We can't take the past itself and look at it through a different set of lenses. It's not gonna work. You're not going to be able to see Auschwitz through a different set of lenses. It's just not going to happen. You're not going to take the Churban of the Romans and the Babylonians and see it through a different set of lenses, through the Crusades and the pogroms and so on and so forth. So what is going on behind the scenes? And the answer is a lot. There's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes over here, and we have to learn the sugya. This is something we need to learn, we need to understand, and I want to begin by giving you just basic Kabbalistic ideas. Now, when I say Kabbalah, so those of you that know me, you know that I have an allergy to teachers that talk about Kabbalah. So what on earth do I mean when I say the word Kabbalah? I'm talking about Kabbalah for dummies. I'm talking about the kind of stuff, those of you who are from LA, anyone from LA, so you will know it, Pika Robertson, you go down to the Kabbalah Institute, and there, right there, you get to see the Kabbalah kindergarten. And they learn about, fun Kabbalah. These are the sefiros of your neighborhood, of your neighborhood. Today, we're going to make, we're going to turn your neighbor into a frog. Whatever they do, there's a lot of Kabbalistic things that are out there, and everyone talks about them. I'm talking about Art Scroll. Here's my ancient Art Scroll sitter that my wife got, Rebbe Mendel. She got this from Rabbi Schaffman. Oh my gosh, 200 years ago. This is a gift in Tafshin Mem Hey. I don't even know what that is. It's like 25 years ago. He gave that to my good wife. And you go and you read about Sfiras HaOmer, and they talk about Sephiros. You go and you look at the Ashpizin, the 7 days of Sukkot, and they talk about Sephiros. Sephiros are spelled with a PH because it makes it look spookier. But the bottom line is that we know that when Hashem created the world, this is like a basic piece of information. He didn't just create the world that we can see, okay, the world that the scientists can study. He built a thing called higher worlds. Everyone knows that. In the beginning, God created heaven and earth. Heaven is not the place where astronauts go. Heaven is called the higher universes. It's the higher levels. And how many higher universes are there? So ultimately, for the purpose of today's class, there are what's called 7 sephiros. And these are the, for example, when you say Shema Yisrael Hashem Hashem Echad, right? So the Ches, the 8, means this world and the 7 above, but the bottom one of the 7 and this world are, so to speak, together. So together they make what's called the 7 sephiros in creation, from the top to the bottom, from in the language of Sfiras HaOmer, or the language of the Ashpizim and Sukkos, from Avram Avinu to Yitzchak to Yaakov, Moshe, Aaron, Yosef, David. Those are the 7 great heroes in Jewish history that corresponded to the 7 spheros. Now, I am going to tell you a little secret, because I know what you're thinking. Rabbi Nissel's talking about 7 spiros. It sounds very much like the 7 dwarfs. I don't know what he's talking about. Soon he's going to talk about the 7 horcruxes. I don't know what he's going to be talking about. Trani's thinking about, okay, it's going to be 7 brides for 7 sisters. I don't know what he's thinking, but I'm telling you a little secret about the number 7. Whenever you see the number 7 in Jewish thought, there's always 3 that are hidden behind the scenes. All 7s come with a pre-existing 3. It's 3 and then 7. The 3 are called the hidden ones, and the 7 are called the revealed ones. This is what you are taught in Kabbalah kindergarten. Now, in case you think,
okay, the days of the week too.
Okay, we're not going to go through how it works with every single example, because literally. This could go on forever. Now I'm going to give you one example, and from that example you'll be able to understand them all. But of course, you have the 7 days of the week, so you have the 7 planets. Whenever you see a number 7, there's always, as Emma has already pointed out, it is consistent. It is always going to be the hidden 3. But the case that I want to talk about really brings out this idea in its most potent way, and that is the 7 species of which the land of Israel is blessed with. So when you are in kindergarten, you are taught the song that goes something like this. Eretz chita u'sa'ira v'gefen v'te'ena v'rimon Eretz eschala v'dvash. Great, okay, and then you find out that dvash is not really honey, it's date honey, and you find out that the 7 species that this world is blessed with is wheat and barley, which apparently are fruits. That is for another day, and grapes, and then you have what's called te'ina, figs, and pomegranates, and then olives, and then finally dates. And each one of these 7 fruits correspond to one of what's called the 7 spheros, as the Vilna Gaon explains. And then I'll show you something extraordinary. Where do we find in the Torah these 7 species? So it's actually, I think it's 3 weeks ago, we read Parshas Akev. When we learned Parshas Akev, we find the 7 species. It's right there at Sheni, the beginning of the Parsha, but it begins with the following words. And I quote, this is Parshas Akev, which is Perek Ches, Pasuk Gimel, Ki Hashem Elekecha miviach al Eretz Tova. God is going to take you to a good land, something that is really, really toiv in every single way. What is it? Eretz Nachalei Mayim. It is a place filled with rivers, ayonos, wells, tohomos, and deep water sources. And then it says Eretz Chita So'era. So you see over here that the 7 fruits have 3 types of water sources that are hidden and under the ground. This is a perfect example of how, where you have something that is 7, so under the ground you have the 3 that is hidden, that is working behind the scenes. Why am I choosing this example of 7 and 3? Because really I want to get to the big idea. And the big idea is something that I'm about to teach you right now. This big idea, if you're hearing this for the first time, I'm telling you, my revered ladies that are listening to me, what I'm teaching you now is a foundation block in Judaism. It answers many, many questions. It is what's called Yesodis of Torah. These are the fundamentals of Torah. Really, you should have been taught this like the first week when you get born. They should say, okay, before you move on, you got to know this fact. This stuff is so important for you to know. What is this all about? I'm going to read it to you from the Kuzari. You all know there's a sefer called Kuzari. It is recommended reading for those of you who are into Jewish thought. And you say to Rabbi Nissel, give me a classic of Jewish thought from the time of the Rishonim. So normally the first people say is Chovos Halevavos. The second thing is always going to be the Kuzari. My Rebbe Revolba felt that every teenager should learn Kuzari, so you should give intelligent answers to the big questions of life. It's in the Sefer Kuzari. And there he brings down an idea that is called in the later books, Soid, the great secret of Tsmiha, of planting seeds. Soid HaTzmicha, the great secret of how we plant seeds. So I'm going to read it to you, in his language, there's certain beauty in his language, hagargir, which is the small seed, shemisgalga, shemisbatel lezevel mayim v'aretz, that becomes annihilated by the fertilizer, the water, and the earth. Then at priyetzer, the fruit comes out. At that moment, when everything has completely and totally disappeared, that's the moment when the fruit disappears. So let me just explain to you what just happens over here. The Kuzari tells us Hashem has a way of running his world when it comes to what's called Golus and Geula, when it comes to the Golus of negativity, of destruction, everything falls apart, and then Geula, everything is expressed in the way it's supposed to be done. He does it in exactly the same way as he planted a seed. So all of life has 3 steps. Step number 1 is called the seed. What can you do with the seed? If you're an Israeli, it could be, you could munch on the seeds on a Friday night after dessert, or you can plant the seeds. If you've never ever seen the planting of the seeds, if you are a city girl, so one of the ladies just mentioned she's from Passaic. Let's just say, for goodness, for the example, that you never actually made it to outside the city, and you now go and you visit a farm and you see a farmer planting a seed. And let's say that you are one of these, you have like animal rights people, you're like a seeds rights person. Go seeds, okay? Seeds lives matter. All these kind of things, like you're rooting for seeds. What is he takes the seeds and he goes and he buries them alive inside the ground. What are you, some kind of a sadist? What did the seed do to you? But that's not what he's talking. He drowns it, he pours water on it, and then he takes cow's dung, he takes fertilizer and he puts it on top, and you're saying, I am reporting to you, to the seeds organization of defending seeds, and you think this is the most horrible and most disgusting thing possible. Not just that, if you would follow the journey of the seed, you would see that the seed is suffering, because the seed actually rots inside the ground. And then there's a certain moment in time where to the naked eye, there's nothing left. It's gone. In other words, that's it. It suffered a terrible, terrible death, and then it's come to 0 hour, and then after that, if you would walk away, you would say, okay, this guy is evil, the farmer is an evil person, and that's the end of the story. But we know that that moment when the seed hits 0 moment, that moment is the moment when it's going to explode out of the ground. But totally different, something that will live forever and ever and ever and ever, something that is infinite. And if you had planted a tree, let's say it's an apple seed, and you planted a good apple seed, so then will come out the trunk, and the trunk will be very bitter, and the trunk turns into branches, and the branches into twigs, and the twigs will produce blossoms, little apple blossoms, which are pretty, but it's not what you want. And then suddenly the fruit will come after several years. And if you eat the fruit immediately, you'll still find it is bitter. But if you wait to the end and you have a good golden delicious apple and you sink your teeth into it and you go yum, and suddenly you realize that you've created something infinite out of that rotting seed. It could be an apple, it could be a mango, it could be an orange, it could be anything that is succulent. Something that is planted correctly can theoretically live forever and ever. This is the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created his world. He created this world that the only way to reach level 3 is to get past level 2, and level 2 is the destruction of level 1. In other words, when you go back to the beginning of creation, and you hear that God created the world with Midas Hadin. Before Midas Hadin, there was the Ratzon to create a beautiful world. Then the world came out, Midas Hadin. Rosh Eini Miskayemes, it's not something that can survive. It's not something that is good this way. So then, afterwards, HaKadosh Baruch Hu adds Midas HaRachamim, and then it can last forever. It's just a marshal, how at the moment of creation, everything starts off good, but then it goes bad, and then when it comes out really good, then it comes out really good forever and ever and ever. The first 3 psukim of the Torah, in the beginning God created heaven and earth, that's good. The second pasuk, the rabbis teach us that corresponds to the 4 empires that came out against the Jewish people. What's the third pasuk? V'yom Hashem yihi or. Now, let there be light. That light is forever and ever and ever. Now, listen carefully. And Emma, listen very carefully, because this goes back to you're the number 7 lady. I want you to listen carefully. That rotting seed inside the ground, that rotting seed corresponds to numbers 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, and 3, and it was called the hidden spheros. In Gimel Rishonos, the first 3 that is invisible to the naked eye. That is a process beyond human comprehension that is always, always hidden. It is always, always, always under the ground. And then what comes out is the 7. The 7 comes out, the 7 is strong, and the 7 is something that is firm, and the 7 is something that can last forever and ever. So when you have the Gimel, the 3 that is under the ground, and the 7 that comes out, so that is how HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world. By the way, Emma Simon asked about 7 days of the week. I'm not going to explain myself now, but just if you happen to have the Kuzari, so if you have a look in section 5, so there he talks about the 7 days of the week, and he precedes it by the number 3. I'm not going to tell you what he says, because it's just going to play with your mind and confuse everybody. But you should know that once you've heard my class, so Trani's thinking, okay, I'm going to look this up. I'm going to find out what he's saying. But once you understand this class, you have an opening to understanding that little piece of Kuzari. Every 7 is always, always, always preceded by that hidden 3. That hidden 3 is working in the opposite direction of the number 7. Now, let's go and start talking about the Churban. The Churban was the worst thing that ever happened in history, and the worst thing that ever will happen in history, because on the deepest, deepest level, when we talk about crusades, and we talk about the pogroms, and we talk about Tach v'Tat, and we talk about Inquisition, and then of course the Holocaust, it all is basically an extension and has its roots in what happened in the Churban. It's all part of the unraveling of the tragedy of the Churban. They're all intimately connected. How awesome is the Jewish custom? The Jewish custom is that the end of Tisha B'Av, I'm talking about the afternoon where literally the fast itself is at its zenith. It's when you are theoretically hungriest, and if it's a hot day, it's when you're weakest, and it's very, very hard. And then at the end of the day, we had this insane custom. Now, the rabbis teach us that at the end of the day was when the fires were raging. That was the worst moment during the destruction of the temple, was Tisha B'Av afternoon. Then we say a tefillah kol nachem. We say a tefillah kol nachem. It's the most incredible thing. Nachem, which literally means the prayer of comfort, is said on Tisha B'Av. And we say these incredible words. I'm just going to read it to you. We say, Ki ata be'esh hitzata, you God, you set fire to your building. You set fire to the building. We're using the power of fire. Ube'esh ata as livnoso, and you will rebuild it with fire. So simply spoken, it means that this goes with the opinion that the third Beit HaMikdash will come down. It's like, Star Trek, like fire coming down. But what it means on the deepest, deepest level, it means that it's the same fire that was used to destroy the temple. That fire, by definition, is what creates the next temple. That's what brings out the power of the future. In other words, in the rotting seeds, that fire of the rotting seed is the fire of the third Beit HaMikdash, of all the beautiful 7 fruits that will come out. And a lot of you are aware of the famous story of Rabbi Akiva, who came with his colleagues. These were the greatest rabbis of the generation, and they saw a fox coming out of the temple, and they all started crying, and this was the most terrible thing to see, the most horrible thing. If you love HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and you love his Beis HaMikdash, and you love that closeness that we had, seeing a fox coming out of the Holy of Holies is the worst possible thing you could see. And then Rabbi Akiva, of course, was laughing. Rabbi Akiva, his essence is that he always sees into the future. His essence is to see beyond. And they say to him, why are you crying? And why are you laughing? And he asked them, well, why are you crying? And he said, we see such a terrible tragedy, should we not cry? And he said, that's why I am laughing. And he goes on to explain, because in that particular Gemara it says, if we saw the fulfillment of the first part of the prophecy, that Al Hartziyain Sheshamein Shualim Hofubo, surely we will see the other prophecies that talk about the Geula. But the way that we're learning it today is that he saw in that fox, in that low point, in that moment when the seed is completely destroyed and there's nothing left, in that he sees all the beautiful fruits of the future. He sees in that moment the complete and total Geula. That's why Rabbi Akiva, more than any other person at the moment of Churban, he was busy thinking about the future of the Geula of the Melech HaMashiach, as is well known from the stories of Rabbi Akiva. So now, take a deep breath, everyone, because I want to bring this down into our own personal lives over here. What I've taught you over here is level 2 of understanding Nechama. The first level is to look at something through a different lens. That is called the Nechama that we do when we go and do a Shiva call, and we say, you should know that there's something different for you to see in the tragedy, because in a sense, the person never really died. And we show them how. We show them the beauty of the person, whatever it is, we try and bring out something that we can hold on to show the people who are mourning that there is on some level, the person never died. But there's another form of Nechama, which is much more deeper, and saying that the seeds of tragedy are actually there to bring out something that is forever and ever and ever and ever. And that is exactly the emunah, the 13th emunah of Tchias HaMesim. You put a dead body inside the ground. You are not putting a dead body inside the ground. You are planting that body inside that ground. You are what's called Melech Memis, Umachaya, Umatzmiach Yeshua. Seid Hatzmiha. You are creating something so that you have level 1, the seed, that's the body, the way it looks like before we die. No offense, but those of you that have had me as a teacher, you know I always say, you're born a raisin, you die a prune. That's it. It's the worst, that's the best we can ever reach, is that the physicality of this world, we're like that seed, that apple seed. Then we plant it in the ground. And what comes out is something that is infinite. What comes out is something that's forever and ever and ever. This time of the year, we talk about the 3 weeks of mourning, and we go into the 7 weeks of comfort, is that the 7 weeks of comfort are actually planted by the 3 weeks of mourning. It's a whole different way of looking at the Chorban. That moment when Mincha of Tisha B'Av, within a couple of minutes, it's all Shabbos Nachamu mode, and everything goes and everything bursts out when the music is permitted. You will know that moment when you haven't heard music for 3 weeks. This year, one of my amazing students, she asked me for a certain leniency in listening to music in the 3 weeks. Everyone was saying, yeah, leniency, the 3 weeks, it's coronavirus, let them listen to music. And I knew this girl was better than that. I said, just try if you can hold on for 3 weeks without music. I'm telling you that when you listen to music after 3 weeks, it's a different type of music. It's a whole different experience, and you'll be glad that you pushed yourself to do that. It's an explosion of appreciation, what music is all about. And that's it, that the 3 weeks actually creates that moment called the nechama, that creates the goodness that happens in the end. So I have a lot of stories that I want to share with you, where we can see this in microcosm in our own lives. I mentioned to you earlier on a personal level, the death of my brother-in-law, which on my personal level was one of the biggest tragedies of my life. So when that happened, so I was actually learning in Kollel here in Israel, and my in-laws went into depression. Those of you that know anything about my wife, Debbie Nissel, Jordy, okay, you know exactly who I'm talking about, whoever else is out there. So it was so hard, and her mother never really recovered. But I just want you to know that my Rebbe Ramesh Shapira said to me, Menachem, I think it's time for you to move to Memphis. Go there and be there for your in-laws, and it'll be the best thing for you. I didn't know what he was talking about. And at that point then in my career, I had no interest whatsoever in becoming a teacher. I'm telling you now, still to this very day, there's a little part of me that thinks teaching is a miserable profession. Why would anybody want to become a teacher? Why can't I just go out? Sorry, Mindel, okay? But why can't you just make like some good money and go out? And on the side, you can teach Torah, it's beautiful. The bottom line is I went to Memphis and I really discovered myself. I found out two things. Number one, that I could teach, and number two, I actually enjoy teaching. And in a bizarre way, the death of my brother-in-law, which is beyond my comprehension, gave me the gift of what I do with my life. So everything I do is really in his memory on the deepest, deepest level. And how awesome is it that my son, it's named after him, is now doing Kiruv in Florida, like how the wheels go round. It's like, it's a crazy thing how these things happen. But that's not the story I wanted to tell you. I warned you, I had a great story that I wanted to tell you. And the story I want to tell you is about my daughter, Aviva. So Baruch Hashem, Aviva is now happily married. She has two kids, and Blia and Hara, one of them was just born last month. And Blia and Hara, I love her. I love my son-in-law. I love my grandkids. But you should know that when Aviva was a teenager, she was hell on wheels. Thank you, Emma. Thank you for your mazel tov. She was hell on wheels. She was not an easy teenager. And as my wife would repeatedly say to me, she's got your genes. And oh yeah, she did. Okay, it was definitely, yeah, whatever it is. I spent my high school years outside the headmaster's office and whatever it is. I grew up in England where they still had physical punishment back there in the 70s. I used to get the cane ladies. I used to get canes. And I'm not even going to say which part of my anatomy, but that's it. I know I'm supposed to say now, it made me the man that I am, but no, it's gross. The whole thing is strange. Don't worry. Aviva was much smarter than that, because when Aviva did bad things, she made sure that no one would find out. And what she did was, bless her soul, she could not stand her English teacher. I don't think it was a personality clash. I also think that she spoke English better than her English teacher, a very bright young lady. And I don't remember the exact details. So let's say that every single week from 10 to 11 a.m. was her English class on Wednesday. So 10 to 11 a.m. At 10 o'clock, she and her best friend, Debbie Shub, they used to play hooky, as they say. They used to sneak out of the school. And behind the school is a train station that takes you into town. I don't have to tell you how bad this is. We're talking about a Beis Yaakov in Yerushalayim or a Kodesh. She not only went out, she took a train to the city, like the middle of the center of town where all the action is. And they had their own special coffee place. They would have a coffee and ice cream. I don't know what they did there. And then at let's say 10 to 12, they would get back on the train in the other direction. And exactly 3 minutes to 12, they would get off. And at 12 o'clock, they'd be in the next class. Ladies, they did this for weeks and weeks and weeks. This was insane. This was going on for weeks and weeks and weeks until one day they were caught. Now, I don't know if any of you out there listening to me are Israeli. Probably the single most disgusting word in Hebrew that you can ever say about another fellow Jew is to call him or her a stinker. You know what a stinker is? A stinker is someone who rats on a fellow Jew. What it means is that there was a certain woman that caught my daughter and her best friend in this restaurant, followed her, saw what they were doing in this coffee house, and then reported her to her principal. Now, again, this is like gross beyond. And I remember that my daughter's first reaction is that I forgive everything that the school's about to do to me, but I'm never in my life going to forgive that stinker. That woman that told me, that's unforgivable. The fact that the school's going to punish me, yeah, I kind of have earned it. I don't know if you know the system in Israel, but what goes on is not just a punishment for Aviva, it's a punishment for the parents. My wife and I have to go and meet with the principal. You know, you guys, if those of you that know Debbie, she would like close her top button and say, "Do I look firm enough?" You know, and it's like she's nervous as anything. We would go there, and we were told and berated how bad our daughter was, and of course she got suspended. Eventually, after doing all kinds of tshuva and things like that, she was allowed back in. By the way, you should just know how the story ends. By the time she hit 12th grade, they asked her to be like the equivalent of a madricha. She is considered to be one of their star students. Today, she's a phenomenal teacher today of kids at risk. But that's how the story ends many years later. But at that point then, the story does not bode well for all of us. And a lot of suffering, and it was a crazy story. And secretly, I was kind of like proud of my daughter. What can I tell you? She was so me, but it was a big price. Then one day, she comes along, Aviva, and she gives us an envelope. And she said, this is for you and for mommy, for all the suffering that you went through. I open it up, and inside is a card that you have won an evening for two in a fancy restaurant. Okay, this is like kind of weird that my daughter is sponsoring, because of what we went through, a dinner for two. And I'm telling you, this is a true story. I said, Aviva, what's going on behind the scenes? He says, don't ask questions. Just go have a good time with mommy. And what do you do? Your 15-year-old girl is saying, don't ask questions. Of course you're going to ask questions. I say, come on, I'm your father. You can tell me. You're not getting into trouble. He says, are you sure you really want to know? Yeah, of course I want to know. He says, I won this in a prize. What kind of a prize? Well, there was a radio station that was offering prizes for the best Hashgacha Prata story. Hashem takes care of you. And there was, I wanted the second prize. I didn't think I'd get first prize. The second prize was a set of books from this rabbi, this Kirev rabbi. I happen to love his stuff. But I ended up getting the first prize. I don't know what to do with an evening for two, so you and mom can have it. I says, what was the story about? He says, you do not want to know. I'm telling you, you do not want to know. I said, you got to tell me. What happened? What happened? Eventually, she told us the following story. Everyone should take a seat and take a deep breath. Remember, week in, week out, week in, week out, she was taking a train from the center of town to the Malot Beit Yaakov, and she was getting up at exactly 3 minutes to 12 at that station without missing a beat. This went on for weeks and weeks and weeks. This was her routine. And then she got caught. What she did not tell me until this point was the following small little piece of information. The week after that she was caught, at 3 minutes to 12, an Arab terrorist took a truck and went to that place where people were getting off that train and started mowing people down with the truck. I don't remember the details, but for sure at least one person was killed. Many people were severely injured. And she said, if I would not have been killed, if I would not have been severely, I would have seen things that would have traumatized me for the rest of my life. And then she said the following words. She said, that stinker, she saved my life. She saved my life. And I'm thinking to myself, how can it be? Tell you, it's like, I still get movement. This is, how can it be that we don't see how HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in our own lives, sometimes shows us how the rotting seed is the fruit of the future, allows us to pervade, allows us to move forward. I'm telling you now that when we look back at history, we'll see that every single tragedy was the 1, 2, and 3 water source going on under the ground. But I'm telling you now that you can start opening your eyes and seeing it a little bit in your own lives. How many people have told me that with this coronavirus, COVID-19, that things have happened in their lives that are so terrible, but they're starting to see how they have grown to heights that were never conceivable this time last year, dafka through the difficulties and the challenges they've gone through. They already see now what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is doing for them on a personal level, how they're reaching this extraordinary, extraordinary high heights. I have other stories. I'm looking at the clock over here, and I want to finish off by answering one question that has not been properly answered. Why the month of Elul? And why does it end up with the world of tshuva? And why is this the words of the prophets, that they are the vehicle that this time of the year we talk about it? And the Rambam says in Hilchos Tshuva that every prophet came to do two things. Number one, to do tshuva, get us to do tshuva, like duh, of course. But the other thing the Nevi'im did was to talk about the future and to show us that there's a reason why you do tshuva. Any one of you that ever knows what it's like to be told off to do something stupid, you're not going to change your ways. out of fear or to please someone. You're only going to do it if you see that in the future there's something beautiful that's waiting for you at the other end that makes it worthwhile. And the best way that I've ever seen when a girl does something stupid with guys is to describe to her what it could be that you could earn like the perfect guy. I'm just using this as a marshal, and how beautiful a good marriage could be. And what do you need this? You're so much better than that. You build them up. And this is the way that the Nevi'im used to do. Klal Yisrael, you're so much better than that. What do you need to do? Behave like the Goyim? Oh, you have to do what they're doing? Mashiach's waiting for you. Olam Haba's waiting for you. So they give you this vision, and that's the greatest, and you're motivated to do tshuva. This time of the year, the nechama comes with the tshuva. The ability to see suffering through a different lens is because we're looking into the future. The world of Yom Kippur, on the deepest level, is the world of Olam Haba, the world where no one thinks about food and no one thinks about the physical things, just the joy of being with Hashem, the joy of closeness to God. The word tshuva literally means to get back to the things that are truly beautiful in our lives. So the Nevi'im are the vehicles of those people that bring us closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu at the end of days. I'm asking you now, I'm hoping that none of you should suffer tragedies, God forbid, and have to grow out of the tragedy. But there are challenges that are very difficult that we go through, whether it's coronavirus or the many other things that are going in with our lives, with shidduchim, or with health issues, with parnasa issues. But we know that in the big, big, big picture, all of these negative things in our lives are 3, 2, 1, and then you know there's going to be an explosion of beauty. As the seed bursts out, everything beautiful comes out. And sometimes you get that as a microcosm. Hashem gives you a smile.